Hello, dear viewers. Support me by subscribing to my channel and share my video if you like it. And also, make sure you comment your thoughts. Now let's start the video. Oberyn Martell woke up wet, and not in the fun way either. He was halfway out of his bed and swiping a knife from underneath his pillow when his muddled mind registered the attacker. It was his darling niece, glaring at him through eyes of streaked coal and with an expression suggesting that he would not be soon forgiven for whatever slight he had done her. "I hope you're happy, uncle." Arianne looked an avenging harpy ready to throw a hapless sailor, or himself, off the nearest cliff. "I often am," Oberyn agreed. "What for now, niece?" "For derailing my wedding." As that incident had passed a good 3 years past, the Viper merely responded with a bemused look. Arianne threw a crumpled parchment at his head. His quick reflexes caught it, and one look showed that the correspondence was ragged. "He's married now." The Viper maintained his look of polite confusion. Arianne growled in frustration, threw her hands up, and then stormed off. Once she was gone, and a check of the open door showed that Doria and Loreza weren't peeking in, he unraveled the ball. The parchment was thick and fine, and the script elegant and familiar. Had Willas finally bowed to prudence and took a wife? If so, why haven't I heard of a wedding? Mace Tyrell wouldn't settle for anything more than the most lavish ceremony for his son, and such took time. Alas, that our friendship brings no invitation. Oberyn looked woefully towards the bed. Would this now be when his beloved paramour rose to comfort and support him through his time of hardship? His answer came a moment later. Ellaria merely snuggled deeper into her, very much dry, he noted, pillow with an overdone sigh. She would be more attentive a moment later, after Oberyn read the letter that almost every significant house in Westeros received in the last 2 days. "To my fellow lords and ladies of Westeros, there is a confession that I, Willas of Highgarden, heir to House Tyrell, must offer. In the last moon, I, with the support of my brothers, Sir Garland Tyrell and Sir Loras Tyrell, and my sister, Lady Margaery Tyrell, entered a conspiracy most foul to kidnap and wed a noble daughter of the North. The maiden, Lyanna, natural-born daughter of House Stark, was taken from Winterfell without the knowledge, permission, or approval of Lord Eddard Stark. She was stolen with all of the gentility afforded to her station as a noblewoman by my brothers and brought to a private ceremony arranged by my sister in the Shield Islands. In order to maintain her reputation throughout the journey, her elder brother, Robb of House Stark, was also kidnapped to fill the role of chaperone. On the 11th day of the 7th moon of this year, we were wed by Septon Vance of Greenshield. Lord Robb escorted his sister down the aisle and took the role of kinship for the bride. My brother, Sir Garland, performed the same duty for myself. My purpose in this admission is not to invalidate the ceremony. Indeed, by all legal means, the marriage has been consummated, and my wife is now to be addressed as Lady Lyanna Tyrell of Highgarden. This is to seek absolvement from the father for my sin. I have erred greatly in the matter of my courtship, and have done House Stark a most grave transgression. My sole justification is that I had been enchanted by her beauty and grace and sought a marriage when none would be offered by either her house or mine. To the Father, I offer my repentance and accept all that his judgment may be of me. To House Stark and Lord Eddard Stark in particular, I offer my most sincere regrets for the loss of a daughter. Lady Lyanna is a treasure, and I pray you understand that love often brings one to foolish deeds. Trust that she will be no less esteemed by myself and my house than she was by yours. To Lord Robb, I offer an apology for the kidnapping and my thanks to your understanding of the matter. To Lady Lyanna herself, I offer my unreserved contrition for the manner of our union. You are deserving of no less a courtship than the minstrel songs, and while I could not have offered one to you now, it will be my foremost duty to amend that oversight hereinafter. May this also serve as a notice of the marriage between Lord Willas of Highgarden, heir to House Tyrell, and Lady Lyanna of Winterfell, daughter of House Stark. Sincerely, Willas Tyrell, heir to House Tyrell. Witness, Robb of Winterfell, heir to House Stark. Witness, Theon of Pike, heir to House Greyjoy. Witness, Sir Garland of Highgarden, son of House Tyrell. Willas kidnapped himself a bride. Willas kidnapped himself a bride? Willas kidnapped himself a bride? Ellaria, wake up, darling. I need someone to tell me whether I've gone mad. You have, his loved managed through a yawn. Let me read the letter then. Ilaria swiftly made her way through the letter, eyebrows rising with every sentence until she was less a sleepy-eyed ewe in the grasslands than a wide-eyed owl in the marshes. Your friend ran away with a she-wolf and wed her in an island ceremony. Yes, I thought that might have been it. A maelstrom of the passions, Oberyn often endured whipped into a sandstorm inside of him. As often before, the viper merely closed his eyes and tried to make sense of the winds. There was fury there, and old hurt, for the reminder of another she-wolf stolen all those years ago. It was eclipsed by curiosity as the truth behind his sensible friend's madness and a dash of amusement, thinking of how others would treat this. A bastard to be wed to a future Lord Paramount, oh, that would ruffle no shortage of feathers. Over it all was the sly calculation that won him his sobriquet far more than a poisoned spear did. There had been that anomalous letter all those moons ago regarding Lady Ashara's bastard. Oberyn had spoken truthfully. The sickly babe died shortly after birth and was buried in a small marked grave in Starfall. The Viper had been off to war and hadn't attended, but he had seen the grave afterward when visiting his good friend, Lord Derek Dane. That child was often confused for Ned Stark's live bastard, though a simple calculation of sums would prove it an impossibility. Lady Ashara Dane's child, had she lived, would have been older than the true-born Stark heir. Presuming the letter was correct to have named Robb Stark the Elder, the Danes hadn't falsified the funeral, and this Liara Tyrell wasn't born of Ashara's womb. Of course, there was another means by which to confirm this, but Oberyn Martell was no grave robber. Holding the presumption that Lady Liara Tyrell wasn't Ned Stark's bastard by Ashara Dane, who would her mother be? An unknown washerwoman or camp follower was the simple answer, but it left Oberyn unsatisfied. Why would Willas wed the daughter of such a woman? He evidently hadn't married the she-wolf for her father's blood, else he would have waited the few years it took for a true-born daughter to flower. Yet Willas had not done that. He risked a certainty of public ridicule and noble scorn, and the possibility of his loss of position and the usurper's wrath to wed Liara Snow. Doran said there had been Tyrell men in plain clothes sniffing around Dane land. Oberyn had no doubt to his brother's intelligence. Doran's spy network was the most extensive one in Dorne. Were they trying to ascertain the history of Ashara's bastard? This didn't make all that much sense either. House Dane was an old and noble house from the Age of Heroes. True, but in recent years, its influence had declined. Certainly was nothing that a bastard of that house would make an acceptable match for the heir to a great house. Ned Stark hadn't sired a bastard on another noblewoman. Had he? Oberyn didn't think so. The man was a stick in the mud who dullness had miraculously managed to catch Ashara's eye. He wouldn't have the luck to strike gold twice. In fact, the last time he had visited had been when he was fetching his sister. I think I should like to speak to my brother, Oberyn decided, to a distracted nod from his lover. Her attention was keenly focused on the letter. And afterward, I would like to pay Willas a visit. How are we to gain produce for winter? Was Kevin's first question after Tywin had read the letter aloud. He had finished it once in the privacy of his solar, where none could see him slam his fist against the desk at yet another fool risking the realm's stability for a good betting. Now he had brought his most trusted advisors in to discuss the latest problem facing his daughter's reign. We will have to offer additional gold or import it from Essos. Tywin pressed his lips so thinly that they near disappeared. The expenses will be higher either way. The Westerlands could afford the cost, but with his good son's spendthrift ways, Tywin was loath to do so. He was having to put aside more in the treasury for the approaching winter as is. The maesters had predicted it to be a long one, though estimates varied from 4 years to a full dozen, and the incompetent rats hadn't narrowed it any further. The upcoming snows had likely been the reason for Robb Stark's understanding of the matter. Could the marriage be annulled? Genna asked. The boy admitted it was against Lord Stark's wishes, and if he should seek a beautiful wife, we could offer any number of daughters. We and every other house in Westeros, Kevin answered wryly. I admit, I desire to view the bastard girl myself, if she could turn Willas Tyrell's eye. That is not a family unknown to beauty, and now that she is wed, it would quench my son's curiosities without tempting anything so foolish. If she, wolves, truly tempt such madness, we should introduce Jaime to any daughters that remain. A quicker death would be to slather him in steak juices and put him outside to their wolf's wood. Jenna laughed. I'd imagine House Stark no more pleased with this daughter's loss than the last. Enough. Tywin said curtly, shooting a swift, admonishing look at the two to end their japes. He was well aware of his eldest son's propensity to bachelorhood. Thank you. He did not need his brother or sister reminding him of the matter. It's highly unlikely the wedding can be annulled. The boy has made it public to all and sundry. House Tyrell cannot hide the affair, and House Stark will not accept a daughter that has been so dishonored. Tywin savored briefly a taste of satisfaction for the troubles soon to befall the Queen of Thorns, and though he rebuked Kevan for it, he shared a mild interest in seeing the bride. The bastard must have been a beautiful creature indeed to fetch so valued an alliance as the Reach before winter. This, the old lion noted with reluctant admiration, is not Lyanna Stark's kidnapping. Are you referring to the consequences of it? Kevan frowned. A bastard and a trueborn daughter are of different worths, and there is no scorned betrothed here, at least not on Willas Tyrell's part. Or, Gannis said shrewdly, eyeing the letter, are you referring to Robb Stark's signature? The latter. Tywin nodded to her. The former was a true kidnapping, to unite the alliance that Rickard Stark and Jon Arryn so carefully built. Robert Baratheon was furious at the loss of his bride, and all of his allies rallied around him to attack the dragons and bring the lady back. Her loss was as much their banner as the stag was. You think this a ploy that Ned Stark allowed his child to wed south? Ned Stark allowed nothing. Tywin dismissed, putting the letter down. He is too honorable to engage in such schemes. His son, however, was not. Robb Stark apparently took enough after his grandfather, either Hoster or Rickard, to take advantage of a rare moment of lustful stupidity on the part of a Tyrell. In one fell swoop, he had rid himself of a bastard sister to support and gained a good brother of a wealthy Southron house. Tywin could appreciate this. He didn't necessarily like it, but he could appreciate it. If only Jaime showed half that prudence, Tywin lamented silently. Could House Tyrell use this to turn the wolves against the king, Genna fretted. Ned Stark is too honorable and loyal a man to weaken his support, Kevan said slowly. Whether Robb Stark is a different matter. It could be that he simply found an easy way to gain provisions for winter and took it. There mayn't be any bearings to the royal family at all. We can't be certain of that. The head of House Lannister shook his head. One stroke does not a player make. Lady Olenna may be displeased by the opportunity, but she'd take it nonetheless to strengthen her house. It may be that Lady Olenna shortly removes the problem for us altogether. If only, Tywin stated dryly, we were so lucky. The indignity, the shame, the humiliation, this is not to be borne. Father, please sit down, Edmure pleaded. Think of your heart. Damn my heart. The old man waved the letter in the air, ignoring the convulsing pains in his bowels as he strode back and forth with all the fury of a man scorned. What was the boy thinking? Marrying the bastard to Willas Tyrell instead of my sweet Sansa or little Arya? To lose such a match. The auburn-haired Tully heir scrambled to catch the letter before his father could throw it into the hearth. Hoster then threw himself into the nearest settee, face convulsed into a rictus of anger. He has shamed his sisters. Well, not all of them. The words slipped out. Edmure promptly regretted them when his father turned blue eyes darkened with reprimands on him. Father, please, I'm sure that Robb made the best decision that he could in the available time. He was kidnapped. Hoster Tully snorted. Hell he was. I've corresponded with Cat's boy enough to know that he'd fight claw and nail before putting any signature down to a forced marriage. No, he did almost everything right. He negotiated a good match. He escorted the girl to the ceremony. He even got the Tyrell to take the lion's share of blame. The only problem is the identity of the bride. The old man folded his arms together and fumed. That should have been Sansa's match. The letter did say that the Lord Willas was smitten with the girl, Edmure ventured hesitantly. His father appeared unimpressed, but wasn't arguing either, so he continued. Mayhaps Robb suggested Sansa, but Lord Willas had a preference in another direction. Hoster leveled an infuriated glance over at the implication that Sansa Stark, who most shared her mother's Tully looks, was in any way inferior to a bastard's beauty. As to preferences, Robb could have offered Arya then. She looks Stark enough. Father, Arya is 9 years old. Hoster stubbornly maintained his point. You had hopes for the crown prince, didn't you, father? Edmure coaxed. The king and Ned Stark are good friends. A match could made in that quarter. A grunt of acknowledgement. Viewing an opening, his son continued, the bastard's marriage should only help, should it not? It shall add more esteem to Sansa and Arya, and other houses would be tempted to offer. Another grunt, somehow warmer than the last. The bastard shall only be a lady paramount, but Sansa, I'm certain, shall be queen, Edmure added, finally drawing out a smile from his father. Now, father, please take your medicine, and no more walking around. You have inflamed your joints more than enough today. Oh, how the mighty have fallen. Cersei nearly brought herself to a second laughing fit as she imagined House Tyrell's distaste for welcoming a bastard to their home. This will set the Queen of Thorns' tongue wagging to keep all of the hunters at bay. Hunters like the lions of House Lannister, no doubt, as they encircled the weakened roses. It wasn't anything quite yet to bring the power-hungry, grasping, jumped-up descendants of stewards down, of course, but their ambitions would be dashed for no short while. How it must burn Olenna Tyrell to have the crippled boy she put so many hopes on make such a foolish mistake. Nothing like mine own son, the queen added proudly. Her Joffrey knew his worth. He would never consort with the likes of bastards or loose women, as Lyanna Snow undoubtedly was. Though this fool of a king might have him consort with a northern savage nonetheless. She sent a scathing look to her drunken husband that Robert was predictably ignorant of. Instead, the fat pig of a man was ranting to Lord Arryn of the letter he received. Pycelle had brought it to Cersei first, allowing a few minutes to regain her composure after cackling through most of it, but had made himself quickly scarce after handing it to the king. A wise decision, as Robert had swiftly decided to send a letter condemning the kidnapping of his one true northern love's daughter. As if Ned Stark's bastard hadn't spread her legs to gain the position as she had. Thus, it was the hand's turn to take up the lowly duty of listening to Robert's ravings and translating them into legible correspondence. Fucking unforgivable what they did to Ned. The king shouted, go into his home, taking his daughter, the bastard, his bastard daughter, and end stealing her maidenhood. And he took the boy too, didn't they? Tell him to give back the boy, and the girl too, give back Ned's girl. Don't like this all. Jon Arryn dutifully wrote this all down, amending as necessary to remain polite and diplomatic. While Cersei nominally disapproved of Robert's correspondence, as she did of Robert himself, this time she was inclined to pleasure. A letter expressing the king's displeasure couldn't annul the wedding itself, but it could, and would, embarrass House Tyrell severely. Particularly as Robert lacked any sense of tact and decorum, and she had already found more than one servant listening closely as they swept the throne room. Cersei hadn't any love for the Roses. They all thought far too much of themselves, and the Queen of Thorns in particular had no proper respect for her. The others were not quite so vocal in their dislike, but she had her suspicions that Aelry Tyrell nee Hightower, whose coloring was a pale shadow of the dragon's, disapproved of her unkindly behavior. Well, perhaps she would be pleased with a bastard for a good daughter, if the girl had that vaunted kindness that Lady Illyri so espoused. This, the Queen decided gleefully, is a good day for House Lannister. Trust a Stark, Bethany Dustin thought wryly, to make a wealthy Southron marriage. While she hadn't any love for the house in particular, the Lady of Barrowtown couldn't fault Robb Stark's decision. A bastard daughter of a Lord Paramount may have had prospects, but nothing quite so good as the heir to House Tyrell. The dowry would be an expense that House Stark didn't need, not with winter on the fore, but if the letter spoke true of a quaint Dornish tradition, the North would come out ahead. It was even admirable that the son had the practicality that Ned Stark undoubtedly lacked when it came to giving his daughters away. The letter to the northern houses had been written in a feminine hand, but the bold signature at the bottom and the dire wolf encircled once mark belonged to the heir of House Stark. To the lords and ladies of the North, when this letter reaches your hand, my sister will likely have been wed to Lord Willas, heir to House Tyrell, in a private ceremony in the Green Shield Islands. To explain the previous sentence, I would have to draw back several moons ago, when a northern contingent traveled to Highgarden to negotiate a trade deal between the North and the Reach. While there, my natural-born sister, Lyanna Snow, made the acquaintance of several Southron nobles. She acquitted herself well and even won the admiration of the man later to become her husband. Many of you have likely spoken of a Tyrell son being enamored with Lyanna. If so, it's the identity alone that was mistaken, as it was Lord Willas initiating a covert courtship. His brother, Sir Loras, was meant to draw eyes away as the two spoke to one another. This courtship continued by correspondence when Lyanna returned to Winterfell, with my, though not mine, father's full knowledge and support. The story unfolded quite like a fairy tale. Bethany had seen the bastard of Winterfell for herself before, and would admit her a beauty worthy of one. A beauty worthy of such a fortune she was less certain of, but if a Southron Ponce was enamored enough to offer, why not accept? The roses had gold enough to spare. A postscript at the bottom, by the Quiet Wolf's hand no less, reiterated the main points and stated that House Stark would not seek martial address. It advocated caution and promised to notify all of the bannermen as the matter unfolded, though admitted that the union was likely permanent. It also affirmed that Robb Stark remained the heir to the north and that Ned himself would be traveling south to complete the negotiations. Bethany could only imagine how much dismay was on the Stark's face when he wrote this. No less, she was certain, than that Tully bitch's face when her husband's bastard caught herself the Tyrell heir. That alone made the entire affair worth it. Benjen had been methodically brushing the snow off of his Black Wolf's coat before leaving it on the rack to dry when Jeor found him. The Lord Commander of the Night's Watch had a strange expression on his face, puzzled, if not yet displeased, when he presented him with a letter. Near 100 men from the cells, 2 years' worth of food rations, 3 years' worth of back taxes, and a bushel of those fireberries of yours, Jeor narrated. I didn't even think the Southrons knew they had Night's Watch taxes. Why would they? The last king to enforce them was Aegon V. The old wheeze of Maester Aemon spoke up. Which house? House Tyrell, if you'd believe it. Jeor eyed Benjen curiously. Heard there's been an uproar in the taverns this morning about a Southron lordling. Know anything about it? The Black Wolf of House Stark thought back to the 2 letters secured in his bedroom, one from his nephew, another from the man his niece had married. Then he contemplated the likelihood of walking away without an explanation. Willas Tyrell kidnapped my eldest niece for marriage. It turns out that all of their siblings were involved in the matter, and the 2 were wed secretly in a ceremony in the Reach. Lord Willas promised a generous bride price for Liara's hand, and Robb negotiated the details of one for House Stark. Allowing a moment for that to sink in, Benjen added, Willas Tyrell sent me a letter asking for a late blessing to their union. Jeor's reaction to his nonchalant tone was utter disbelief. Must be some lass then. Benjen recalled his eldest niece, melancholy and reclusive, often like her father, but with a generosity of spirit and an unyielding loyalty that had been purely Lyanna. He smiled softly. She is. The 2 were broken of the peaceful silence of the moment with Maester Aemon's frank, so your brother hasn't given his blessings to any of this? Nope. Lord Willas means to secure your support by bribing the Watch then? Probably. Can you string him along for more of such donations? Benjen considered the question. Then he nodded. I can do that. Good man, Jeor said, approvingly, clapping the Stark's shoulder. Have you any other nieces to be married off? Alice Karstark was startled when silence fell upon their table. It was not that theirs was a rowdy home, but their father did take breaking their fasts as an opportunity to share his wisdom with his children, and Lord Rickard Karstark did appreciate the sound of his own voice. The dark-haired noblewoman was not the only one broken out of an early morn stupor by the sudden lack of sound. She was, however, seated to the left hand of her father today, and the closest of the 4 siblings, to obtain for herself the letter he held. Wiggling it out of the Lord's hand, she brought it close to her eyes, blurry as the words were from a distance, and swiftly read it through. Tourney, kidnap, bride price, south, House Tyrell, hire, Robb Stark, marriage, negotiation. Harrion was next to reach out and pluck the parchment from her slackened fingers. Alice was furiously trying to understand what she had just read through. Liara Snow. She had met the eldest daughter of Lord Stark a mere handful of times, but while not as visibly affected as her brothers, even Alice had noted the rare beauty the bastard held. Liara had been soft-spoken and quite polite, often shuffled to the back by either a Lady Stark diligently aware of her presence, or a Lord Robb diligently aware of Alice's brothers. The woman was a gifted writer, she knew, often said to resemble her late Aunt Lyanna and a shared favorite amongst all of her younger siblings. Liara Snow had also borne the darker coloring of the North, though Alice, who did quite resemble a traditional Northern beauty, did not think so. Lady Liara was a beauty, undoubtedly so, but she was not a Northern one. In truth, Alice hadn't more than an acquaintance with the bastard of Winterfell, though she expected that to change in a handful of years. Torrhen had been apprenticing under a talented silversmith in White Harbor, and soon to complete his training and acquire a home of his own would have pressed his suite for the lady. He had been besotted with her, a feat Alice credited more to eye than heart, as he had rarely spoken to Lady Lyra of his own nervousness. Alice assumed that the suite would be accepted. Torrhen was a good catch, truly, and would be even better once he learned to gather his wits around the girl and looked forward to gaining a good sister of her own. Alice loved her brothers, she did, but gods, did the Carhold need some good female company? Well, Torrhen won't be pressing a suite now, Alice thought sympathetically. The third eldest son of Lord Karstark was a good catch, but compared to the heir of Highgarden, beauty alone would be lacking. The Lady Lyra must be rather clever and sly. Torrhen had irritably related mention of the Poncy Southron prick with the feminine golden locks and excessively lavish cloak of bluebells to have crowned her. Alice had been impressed then. Who knew that her fellow northern maiden was aiming all that higher for her wedding cloak? Or, the noblewoman added admiringly, that Lord Robb would so ably advantage the Rose Lord's infatuation into food reserves for the winter. Robb Stark had always been a catch as the heir to Winterfell. To that, most ladies were aware of his amiable nature, swordsmanship skills, and handsome mane. Adding wit on top of that, all was simply making Alice cross her knees before the heat in her loins could stir any further. Risking himself to a negotiation for the North was quite dutiful too. Ladies of the North had always appreciated a dutiful man. Pleased with the letter, Alice looked up to other reactions. Her father was still held in shock, though a rictus grin of pleasure was slowly spitting across his face. Harrion was altogether unfoundedly smug by the letter. Eddard was still pursuing the parchment, quickly growing excitement in his eyes, while Torrhen waited impatiently for his turn. Alice's view stopped. Oh dear, Torrhen. When her second brother had finished and the third was just reaching for his turn, Alice felt a moment of sudden panic. She grabbed at the first platter she could reach, bruised beet stew from the dinner last night, in fact, and threw it at him. The violently purple liquid soaked through and promptly ruined the parchment, even as Torrhen spluttered over bits of beef staining his face and eyes. Fortunately, the soup was lukewarm by now, so he hadn't gotten hurt. Alice, though, had gotten all eyes turned to her. She chuckled nervously. Oops! Willas Tyrell kidnapped a northern bastard? The servant nodded obediently. Yes, sir. Practical, bookish, sensibly Willas Tyrell? Yes, sir. The crippled boy that walks around with a cane, my nephew who fears the blessed binds? Yes, sir. The Lord furrowed his brows in mild uncertainty. Are you certain that it is our Willas Tyrell? Yes, sir. I do believe that there's only one Willas Tyrell, and he did indeed kidnap the baseborn daughter of Lord Stark. Tymon Flowers regretted his wry words shortly after having spoken them, but Lord John Fossaway, a more amiable employer than most, merely waved them away. He still stared down at his desk, where the infamous Tyrell letter rested on brightly varnished apple wood. Then he looked up, hazel eyes brimming in confusion. Why? To have the strongest claim to the throne was Tymon's suspicion. However, the baseborn servant was too wily to share the knowledge that had him effectively banished, hopefully temporarily, to New Barrel. Instead, he offered an enigmatic smile. Should I compose a response to Lord Willas requesting further clarification of his actions? The Lord of New Barrel considered that for a moment and then shuddered. I should think not. Family they may be, but if there's to be internal divisions between Lord Willas and his father, or God's forbid, Lord Willas and Lady Olenna, then I want no part of it. Draft a letter of congratulations and have it brought to my desk. I'll have Janna inquire amongst the other cousins of how to approach this, and should the marriage appear true, we'll send it. As you wish. Tymon fell into a practiced bow with just the necessary amount of flourish and was waved away by a distracted Lord Fossaway. In truth, the man's lack of heirs and disinterest in intrigue made him a breath of fresh air to the servant. He enjoyed work for the minor reach lord, though he desired still to return to Lord Willas's employ. Tymon had previously settled his goals on mere stewardship of his beloved sister's eventual estate, but now Lord Willas was ascendant, and, as Tymon well knew, those lords that were rising in the game were always in need of good help. It is a jest, dear heart, isn't it? Mace looked hopefully over to his wife, sitting stunned in her seat after she had read aloud the missive hurriedly brought by the servants. What is it that the children are doing these days, Alark? It is a lark, surely. He laughed weakly into the silence. Our children have played such a delightful lark on us, to pretend to wed a bastard to Willas. I don't think this a lark, Allery interrupted. The silver-haired woman gracefully withdrew herself from her position, taking dainty, ladylike steps with perhaps more haste and less composure than typical to her husband. She brought the letter up to Mace's eyes, pointed to a final line at the bottom. At least she has good child-birthing hips, Mace read aloud. All of his hopes for this to be nothing more than a decidedly tasteless jape crumbled at the Queen of Thorns' words. How could they? Allery rubbed his back soothingly. I'm certain Mother had her reasons. And Willas, his own, the noblewoman paused. She is young and well-mannered and dearly loved by my eldest son. I can accept this, if I must. I'm certain she does. Mace cried out, jabbing a finger roughly to the bottom of the page. That's not my concern now. Look at this. All of our children were involved in the plot, and Mother too. Indeed, Allery looked puzzled. Why does this distress you? They didn't invite us to our own son's wedding. You'll be dancing with the Knight of Flowers and drinking tea with all of the ladies of Highgarden? Oh, Sansa, you're so lucky. The red-haired girl beamed at Jane Poole's jealousy-tinted words. I know. I was ever so happy when Lyra offered to foster Arya and I. She'll be the lady of this grand and beautiful castle, and while there's a great deal for her to learn, we will have such fun exploring Highgarden together. With your beauty, you will fit right in at the Rose's courts, Jane sighed. She threw an irritable glance towards Arya, who was scowling unkindly at her tumbled strings as she tried to set them to order. It will be entirely wasted on Arya, of course. Rather than agree, as would be her typical wont, an anxious frown crossed Sansa's face. It wouldn't be. Lyra said that she would allow Arya to join in her sparring lessons with Sir Garland. The brunette girl's face twisted into a moue of confused distaste at the mention of the act. Lyra doesn't still spar, does she? It was bad enough as a bastard here, but she's a Southron lady now. Sansa opened her mouth to reply, but Catelyn Stark had finally reached the end of her patience with this conversation. Girls, she rebuked sharply, kindly return to your work. And Sansa, I will have no more of this talk of Highgarden. You're under your father's punishment now. Her eldest daughter meekly nodded. It was a surprise when Arya merely glanced over, not offering her own acerbic commentary to Sansa's reprimand. It would have been pleasant if the truce hadn't been born of shared solidarity over sending a bastard down to marry a Lord Paramount's heir. Return to your sewing, Catelyn reminded herself briskly when her hands began to shake. You are Lady Catelyn Stark of Winterfell, and you will finish embroidering this tunic for your son's name day. Rickon would reach 4 years of age before the 2 moons that Ned had settled on each of his children as punishment expired. They were disallowed sweets and desserts, curtailed in playtime, and assigned additional lessons every day. Despite this, the mood in Winterfell was merry, as the bride price had leaked amongst the servants, and everyone was in high spirits over one of their own, marrying so highly. Catelyn could not finish scolding one servant for sneaking a child a treat before another was attempting to do the same. When it ends, Sansa's demands to be fostered in Highgarden will continue. The opportunity for her daughter to blossom in one of the finest Southron courts in Westeros, if not the finest court outside of King's Landing, was once all Catelyn had hoped for. It still was, even if the chance given was at the generosity of a girl child that she loathed as much as she feared. That Lady Catelyn Stark nee Tully would loathe the bastard her husband brought home from war was of little question. How could she not despise the symbol of her husband's infidelity? Though the child herself was innocent, how could she not be pained by every mention of her beauty, her grace, her reclusive personality so alike to Ned? How could she not be worried when every comparison drew her to a Stark, when her very existence proved some loss for her own true-born children? Mine own daughter looks more a Stark than Lyra Snow does. No matter how the servants looked at it, Catelyn hadn't found the same Stark cast on the bastard's face. There were Stark features present, certainly, the dark hair and the slightly long slant to her face, but there were so many, a heavy-lidded gaze, those unnatural eyes, her plush lips that were born elsewhere, and sometimes, when she heard those comparisons, Catelyn just wanted to scream. No, she doesn't. She's not the spitting image of her late aunt. She never was. Why do you not see those features that had not come from House Stark in her as easily as you do mine own children? Catelyn didn't know if it would have been harder or easier if those words had been true. If Lyanna Snow did look exactly as Stark and had no trace of that foreign blood that chilled her heart, the Tully had spent more hours than she cared to think for, tracing river blue eyes over that face, tormenting her heart and mind both in trying to reconstruct the child's mother. Lyanna Snow was a beauty. Was the woman Ned betrayed her for also a beauty? Ned wouldn't share a name with her, Ashara Dane. Her hopeful heart whispered, "Let it be Ashara." Dead and gone and no longer able to tempt him, so Catelyn did not even know if the bastard's mother lived. It was the main reason she feared her, a recurring nightmare that Lyanna would draw her mother back to Winterfell and then Ned would betray her all over again. Bastards are sinful, lustful creatures, and this one didn't even wait to steal her sister's husband from him, Catelyn thought viciously, and then bit her lip sharply. No, she would not maintain a lie for her daughter's sake, not when Sansa so adamantly disposed it. My darling daughter is meant for the prince. He will make a far better groom for her than the cripple of Highgarden. Catelyn had thought to comfort her daughter about the bastard's selfish actions. Instead, she had been faced with a child overjoyed to have been part of his romantic caper, without any concern at all for the potential husband lost to her. Instead, her daughter had briefly stepped down from where she walking on the clouds to reassure her. Willas Tyrell sounds everything a proper lord should be, kind and handsome and intelligent, but I think he would make a better good brother for me than a husband. Sansa laughed, undoing her braids and letting Tully red hair hang loosely. Lyanna and he are well suited for one another. She loves to read as he does, meddle with strange substances, and canter through the countryside. Neither love balls over much, nor, I think, tourneys, and I would not want a husband who was not also a knight. A man does not need spurs to be honorable and gallant, Sansa. Oh, I know. Father is amongst the best of men, and he hasn't any spurs. Sansa leaned over to press a kiss to her mother's cheek, but I would want a man with spurs nonetheless. Lyanna has her bookish lord and is happy with him, but while I do love my sister, in truth she can be rather boring. When she's not fighting pirates during a kidnapping, of course. The Tully left the conversation simultaneously proud and saddened that her daughter seemed to have grown slightly. As it was, she chose to focus on the positive sides of this arrangement. Lyanna Snow was gone. Winterfell had a surplus of food for the coming storms. Sansa would be fostered in Highgarden, where she would become an even better marriage prospect for the crown. And a queen outranks a lady paramount every time. The Roses have their own stake to the throne. Varys was too well composed to sigh irritably, though he naturally had the desire to do so. Not for the first time, he lamented his own decision to waylay Rhaegar's plot, thinking it to set a dangerous precedent for the crown. In his mind, King Aerys's madness could have been controlled for a brief few years, and then the succession peacefully ensured for his kind-hearted, if untested, eldest son. He had offered intelligence on the Silver Prince's plot to derail the work of lords meddling too deeply into royal business, knowing that Rhaegar Targaryen was too beloved to be cast away as heir. Of course, then an untested young man chose to think with his lesser head on the matter, and everything went, as the small folk in Flea Bottom were prone to say, tits up as a result. The Master of Whispers should have just kept his trap shut. One could only waste so much coin in playing the harp, and better a king that walked amongst the commons than a lush in the brothels. Either were security risks that brought him headaches to protect, but at least the former didn't invite potential assassins to his bed. Not including the one he wed, of course. Varys hid his twitter of amusement by practice, glancing through long lashes at the cuckolding lioness the king was bound to. Shame Prince Rhaegar isn't alive today to have his own actions turned against him. His beloved Visenya stolen willingly from her home by another love-struck Southron. This she-wolf had 3 brothers too, but rather than inopportune the youngest, Willas Tyrell had the sense to obtain the support of the eldest. By all accounts, the young wolf had even walked his sister down the aisle and held up the kinship goblet for the groom to drink from. This opens opportunities. Varys wanted peace and prosperity for the realm. Any monarch could bring that to Westeros with a modicum of human decency, above-average intelligence, or the common sense to hire good advisors, and the ability to beget male children. These were not such vaunted qualities that his task need be so difficult, though somehow it always felt that way. He didn't even mind which house controlled the crown, though he would naturally prefer that the blood sit of the dragons on the Iron Throne. In the end, Varys was a simple man of simple expectations that everyone else made far more complex than necessary. His chief complaints were Cersei Lannister and her incest-born monstrosity Prince Joffrey, but Willas Tyrell had impressively made the short list. Preceding this, Varys had set aside the youngest of the Silver Prince's children and focused on other options, including Viserys, Daenerys, and Illyrio's son, as a substitute for Aegon. It was a shame, of course it was, to lose Rhaegar's progeny. Whatever his other faults, the Silver Prince had been just and kind and true. But what could he do? No one would accept a woman on the throne, and, as a bastard, Lyanna Snow could not beget a true-born king. Moreover, her main base of support would be a kingdom that had allied with the Stags once before, though perhaps not once again. Robb Stark had attended the wedding. He hadn't the same ties to the king that his father did, nor the same hidebound honor if he was willing to negotiate a marriage in secret for his cousin. Willas Tyrell will put the key to the kingdom into her womb soon enough. The Master of Whispers hadn't as many little birds in the north as he'd like, but he'd collected a few useful bits of knowledge. Lyanna Snow was an intelligent, if melancholy child, much like her own father had been. She hadn't shown any signs of madness yet, possibly having stamped it out with her Stark bloodline. If her son followed suit, he would not be an unattractive option for the throne, with the Roses, Wolves, and possibly Trouts supporting him. Varys would have to quietly insert a few forgeries to remove the child's mother of the taint of bastardry, but that wouldn't be past his abilities. The child would have the advantage of being raised in Westeros as well. Decisions. Plots and plans encircled around a babe even conceived yet. Truly, the Game of Thrones demanded too much from her players. One thing is certain, everything has changed.